Hi, I want to talk today about social media and public relations. One of the things to think about with social media as far as a form of writing, as a form of way to communicate best practices, is that it's a very quickly changing form of communication. And so, some of the things I'm going to talk about today are probably kind of best practices that you might be able to use, as a general rule of how you approach that type of venue. But obviously, as new technologies develop, as new things happen, that will change. One thing is to keep in mind is that you will, suppose you graduate from here and immediately go into a career. This semester, at the end of this semester, you go into a career in public relations, and you start working and you start engaging the company's social media accounts, or however it is that you want to do this. Well, assuming, you have a 40-year career, you start at 22, you work till you're 60 something, 40, 50-year career, you will go through a lot of different things. If we were to go and say, well, what about somebody who's practicing public relations today, who started back when they were 20 and they're now getting ready to retire at 65, they've been in the business since 1987 or something, right? I mean, this would have been prior to the internet. This would have been prior to, even very widely spread personal computing. There would have been personal computers. There probably would have been much networking within an office, would have been mainly word processing, things of that nature, maybe some small databases. So, they would have started off with a very traditional print, video as in actual production to video and film. And they would have slowly advanced, with the creation of MySpace and email. And those would have had certain types of ways of doing it. Then they would have had MySpace maybe as the first social media, Facebook. Along came YouTube. Suddenly there were videos. Now you can embed the videos onto Facebook. You can do Facebook Live. You can do Snapchat. So the idea there is the technology would be considerably changed. And that isn't just something unique to public relations. I mean, if you're a medical doctor, 45 years ago, I mean, most people, if they had heart attacks, maybe if they caught it after it had happened, they would have done open heart surgery if they survived and were able to get to that point. Otherwise, that wouldn't happen. Today, the idea of cutting open someone's chest to perform heart surgery is a little bit rare. I mean, it's not a common occurrence. Most of the time, they know they're gonna do a test on you if they suspect that type of thing, and they're gonna do it all from basically inserting a catheter up through your leg and into your heart, and they're gonna fix your heart from inside. And so the idea there is even if you're in medicine, even if you're in anything, these technologies are going to change considerably year to year and time to time. And so, when I talk about how you do it, I think you kind of have to keep an eye on what are the best practices of keeping things short, keeping things engaging, rather than thinking specifically about how you engage Facebook or Instagram, because chances are 10 years from now, people probably won't be engaging those as much as they'll be engaging some other medium of communication. So one of the things, though, that I want to start off with is there was a study a few years ago of it was a study of younger Israelis. It was asking why do they go on. So the author references that, and most people who are on social media say the main reason is they're on it to connect with friends, and the second reason is to play games and amusement. So you kind of have to keep in mind that is when you're engaging in social or mobile media, that people are on their phones, they're on their computers, they're on social media, with the idea being they want to connect with friends, have a little fun. They're not necessarily looking for a sales pitch. They're not looking for products usually. And so if you engage it from that perspective, you're not going to engage your medium. You need to go in there and be their friend. You need to go in there and have, oh, well, when I go to this business and I engage it, I see some kind of fun, amusing things. I find them to be friendly. I see them commenting on my stuff. I see some exchange. You don't want to approach it as you would perhaps a business relationship or other types of media. Now, one of the kind of fun things, I'll just kind of mention it just because it's a fun little example here of ways to kind of engage as the technology has evolved. One of them is Burger King uses one of the kind of fun technologies, if we're talking about mobile devices, is you can use your app to track where people are at. And you can create what are called geofences or other, geolocations. And so basically, or geofencing. And what Burger King did was they decided that they would one day roll out that if you downloaded their app and you were within 600 feet of McDonald's, or you were at a McDonald's and you decided to open their app, they would know you were in location near McDonald's and they would give you a 1-cent burger in its place. So this, of course, quickly spread. And in that one day they did this, they sold 1.5 million, or I'm sorry, they had 1.5 million downloads of their app. How many burgers they sold for a penny is hard to say. I don't remember if that was in there, but the case is by doing this kind of promotion, kind of using that type of technology, doing it in a fun way, they were able to drive people to their app. And once people have the app, they're likely to come back and order again. And so that's kind of where that's at. Now, some of the things that I'm just kind of highlight a few things as we go along through this. One of the ideas there is that with social media is that you should be doing what they call social listening. And social listening is the idea that you as a public relations professional should be actively listening, monitoring what's going on your social media. You should respond to the social media. You should take part in communicating with it. You should, if there's a problem, you should deal with it, that kind of thing. So the idea there is this is kind of an active way. But the other thing that's there is you can also be listening and finding out what the community is saying. If you're getting a lot of negative comments about your products, about their service, about what's going on, you can take that to management and say, we're having some real problems. This place is having an issue. This place is having an issue. And a lot of companies who, have a very engaged social media, this is a way that sometimes customers have learned that this is a quick way to resolve your problems, that you can deal with kind of lower level customer service reps who aren't necessarily that concerned about your problem. But as soon as it gets out there and they're tagging your site and they're posting on your page saying, boy, I wouldn't do business with them, here's what they did to me, a lot of times they're very responsive. I can tell you from experience that a few times I've had a very unhappy experience. I've complained via social media or something else. I've tagged it or commented on their page, and usually they're very quick to respond. But that's a type of social listening. That's a very easy way to get an idea of what the public is thinking. But the other thing is it's also a way to learn very quickly how the public is thinking about your company and to be able to know where you can improve and the things you're doing well. And so by listening and engaging it, saying, we're sorry, people see, even if somebody is negative, if they see you respond, they tend to think, oh, well, they are responsive at least. And if it's positive, you say thank you, things like that. It encourages good citizenship, but it also gives you a good sense of what is going on. Now, the other thing is about that is it's one of the discussion board questions is how do you deal with somebody like deleting messages, like somebody's on there and they're going like, this is the worst product, I hate it, blah, blah, blah. And they do it on your, social media page. They've tagged your social media page or they posted it in response. Maybe you have a post and they've responded to that post and they've said, they go off on your company and how they don't like you. Is it okay to delete those messages? Now, generally, I would say no, you really shouldn't, but there is cases where it is okay to delete messages. In certain cases, you should probably have a social media policy. Now, should you delete messages that are negative towards your company? Well, probably not, especially if it's in a way of doing a review. It would be seen as you're killing their ability to speak freely. The better thing to do with those types of things is to respond, engage, offer ways to cure the problem, but not just to delete it. However, it would be okay to delete, and it's okay to have a policy in order to prevent things like people spamming. If people are responding to your comments by saying, oh, well, you should come here and buy our product. Yeah, that's okay to delete. Nobody, I mean, that's your page. You're not there to host their advertising, and that's perfectly fine. But you need to make sure you're not deleting things just because they're negative. If people are being threatening, if somebody says, I hate your company, I'm going to, engage in violence against it and its employees, that would be an acceptable thing to remove and probably alert the authorities because that would be problematic. Then, the other examples might be if they make racist, sexist, other groups that protected groups, and they're using your site in order to do that, that would be perfectly acceptable. And if their insults go in that direction, and they say, well, I would never shop at this business because it's a bunch of people with, that are, have a certain sexual orientation, a certain ethnicity, a certain, disability, whatever that might be, then that would be an acceptable thing to delete. But you're not deleting it because they're negative towards your company. You're deleting it because it is attacking a marginalized or a group that you don't feel would be appropriate, and it's threatening violence, or it's being disparaging, things like that. But by and large, those would be the only reasons you should do it. That would be perfectly fine to have it, but then you need to make sure to do it. If somebody uses something that's disparaging towards a group, or is ethnically insensitive, or insensitive to people based upon gender or other social or abilities or disabilities, then but yet they're saying this product's great, but and then it uses some comment that's disparaging towards some marginalized group or some group that you think is just negative, then I would also delete that, even if it's positive towards your business. Now, some of the other listening that sometimes is done, and there are companies that can do this for businesses, is there's the idea of doing visual listening. One of the things that's interesting is you can actually set up searches. I, for example, have set up, Google will send me an update if my name ever appears online or something like that. I don't know. I don't think I actually have my name set up, but I have in the past had that, or had certain businesses or organizations, things that I'm associated with, set up so that when it gets mentioned, Google automatically emails me every day. And so it's kind of an interesting thing because you can set your own name up, you can set companies up, you can set up businesses you're interested in, and then every day you get these messages saying that that something happened with that name. Now, the reason why that's really good, but there's also what we might call visual listening, and that is where about 80% of the time that people talk about companies, they don't actually say McDonald's, they don't actually say Starbucks, they don't actually say Target. Instead, what they'll do is they'll post a picture, and they'll be like, they'll have a cup here, like a Starbucks mug, and this is my Lincoln Land mug that has some coffee kind of stains on the outside here. But they'll hold it up, and they'll be like, Starbucks cup, they're like, enjoying my morning. Or maybe they'll, but then the other thing is they might post that picture, and it might say overpriced and not that good, and they hold up like a Starbucks cup or an Arby's cup or something else. They're not mentioning it within it, but by doing a visual search, by looking for logos and looking for other things in images, by having these searches performed, you'll find a lot more. You'll find that only about 20% of the time when people comment on social media about your business or industry, do they actually mention your business and industry by name in a way that you would be able to catch with one of these Google searches. And so what happens is, I think they say about, like Starbucks is about 30,000 mentions a day. Most of those are not pictures of people doing that. There are pictures of people holding up Starbucks and they're happy drinking it. Or there are people at McDonald's, like having a miserable day holding up their Egg McMuffin, things like that, right? And so what you can do is you can begin to get a sense of how do they, correspond that brand. A few negative people can have a very negative impact on your brand as in general. And so all that's part of that listening cycle, kind of getting an idea, engaging with it when necessary, but kind of being that. And this isn't so much, because remember, public relations isn't just about taking the message from the company, but part of deal of public relations is to relate. And part of relating requires you to take the message from your customer or your different publics and bring it back to the company. And so if you're getting a lot of negative or a lot of people saying, that are maybe making negative comments, then you can take that information, take it back to those people who are in charge and say, how can we make this better? How can we overcome this image of ourselves in order to improve the brand? All right, as far as other things I want to talk about, one of the common things that people will do is and this doesn't have to be just social media or mobile media. There's what we sometimes call newsjacking. Newsjacking is where basically a company, business, organization, individual, and basically takes something that's in the news currently and interjects themselves into that storyline. What happens here is, for example, recently, for example, there was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. A lot of people posted stuff that was, we respect Dr. King, and then they put a picture, use a quote, and then say, we stand for the principles, our company stands for those principles. Sometimes if, for example, this year I think I've sent out a message earlier. As I'm making this video, I haven't sent out the message, but by the time you see this video, I will have sent out the message about the Super Bowl this year. Is a lot of companies, Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, all have decided they aren't going to advertise, or at least not advertise in the traditional sense, for the Super Bowl. A Super Bowl commercial costs about $5.5 million for 30 seconds. Anheuser-Busch probably would have bought 20 of those. They would have spent somewhere in the ballpark of $100 million maybe advertising. I don't know if they would have spent that much, but they would have spent a lot of money. Well, probably. And Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, they would have spent 20, 30, 40, $50 million advertising. And so a lot of these companies this year are saying, with COVID, a lot of their customers are hurting. A lot of them have been put out of work, having other issues. And so instead, they're going to donate their money that they would have spent on advertising to create the commercials, air the commercials, do that type of thing. And they're going to donate that money to bring about COVID awareness, COVID-related charities, things like that. Now that would be considered newsjacking. It'd also be a form of, advocacy, public relations. And so what happens is they're kind of trying to take that news and then turn it in a positive way to say, hey, we're above this. We're not just looking for your money. We care about you, and we think the better way to care about you is to provide free or to provide the money we would have spent on advertising for this. At the end of the day, it probably works with the Super Bowl fairly well, because Super Bowl is as much talked about on the news and in social media as it is the actual commercial that gets the attention. And so if you can steal that early news cycle, you're still getting a bang for your buck. You're coming across very positive. The problem is if you come across and you try to use that in a way that comes across as disingenuous, that's where the problem lies. If you're a politician, suppose you're Rand Paul, U.S. Senator from Kentucky, I believe. The guy has been out there pretty adamant. He's a medical doctor. He's been pretty adamant about the fact that COVID's not a big deal, refuses to mask, that kind of thing. And if you then said, well, I'm going to give all my money and I'm not going to, promote my campaign this week. Instead, I'm going to donate it for masks. Well, then that's going to come across as very disingenuous when you've spent a lot of time talking about that not being the case. And so one of the things you have to be careful about is your message does have to not come across as hypocritical. It has to resonate. Sometimes if you try to newsjack and take these things in order to take a moral higher ground, it can have a very disastrous consequence if you're tone deaf in your approach to it. Now, as far as things go, one of the things with posting, like let's take, for example, Facebook, Instagram, other things. One of the keys is, with anything you post, you want to make sure you have an image. People like seeing images. If you just have a text box, it's not going to get as much attention as if you have a photo that goes along with it. The photo can be stock art, other things of that nature. If you're looking for art as part of your process of doing this, do make sure you look for images that you've either purchased the license for if you're in public relations, or if you're in a small startup and don't have that kind of money. You can always look for public domain images. A lot of companies, even like Shutterstock, will sometimes offer public domain versions of their image. It just has to have the Shutterstock logo in it. And you'd have to read the licensing agreement. There's sometimes they are okay with that as long as you tag it back to them. But you need to make sure you do any images you use, you do have a legal right to use it. Because if you don't have a legal right to use it, they can sue you for invasion of their copyright, and reasonably so. I mean, they took the time to take that picture, to create that image, to process it. I mean, somebody, makes a living off doing that. And when you use their image without their permission, you are stealing from them, and potentially, people are going, well, I won't hire anybody, we'll just steal images. Well, that's great, but you're wanting to go into public relations and people go, well, I'm not going to pay anybody to do my public relations or take my pictures. I'm just going to steal it from other people. So guess what? You don't get a job. So you got to take some respect for that, out of nothing more than a mutual, assured destruction if you don't. It's the golden rule. Would you want people to steal from you? No. So don't steal from other people. But as far as it goes, you always want to have an image, and with that image, you want to make sure there's some sort of caption. Now you can put a caption on the picture, but you can also put a caption below it, something like that. You want some sort of image, make sure people know what it's about. And then usually you put text above it. The text is usually, depending upon what you're trying to promote, what you're trying to do, it can be serious, it can be kind of fun, it can be kind of silly, it can be whatever you want. But that above it should connect with it. The idea here is suppose you're doing something like, suppose you own a restaurant and you are simply as kind of a daily social media, you're trying to promote your daily specials. Today, as I'm making this, it's a cold day. It's snowed a little bit, not very much. And maybe you have like your restaurant. So early in the morning, you want to do a special about your soup of the day. You might want to put a picture of the soup, put the name of the soup in a caption or somewhere on the bottom, do that kind of thing. And then above it, you might say, it's going to be a chilly day, high of 29, come in for a warm cup or order it to go, and, do something like that, or somehow connect it. But you do want text above it. You want the picture, you want an image. And so there's kind of a layering of information there. Some people prefer the image, some people prefer to read, but you do need to connect it. The key though is keep the information short and what we call snackable. And the idea there being is don't make it long that people are going to read like a page and a half, if that's the kind of engagement. People are scanning through social media, they're on their phones, they're in, doctor's offices, they're walking down the street checking a couple things as they're doing things. Don't do it in a way that is going to become, it's going to take too much of their time. You make it short and sweet. But the other thing about that image, like suppose, once again, kind of being a cool day, maybe you're wanting to start promoting, you own a clothing store and you want to start promoting, spring clothing, something like that. Okay. It's something you might do from a public relations standpoint or a marketing standpoint. So you have like a half off sale. So you have a picture of some clothes, captions, half off sale for spring clothing. And then maybe above it, you're going to have something that connects with it and say, it's chilly outside, but nothing warms you up better than shopping for spring clothing. Start thinking spring early or something like that. It's going to be warm around the block, kind of connect with it, have a little fun, bring them into the image, connect with them. And that's better than just having just that picture. If it's just the picture, people see the picture, scroll on by, get some words, get them to connect, have a little fun. And remember, why are people on social media? They're there to connect with friends. They're there for fun and amusement, largely, right? They're not there because they're not there mainly because they want your opinion on mask wearing. They're there because they want to see what their friends are up to, right? I hate to break it to you, but most people are probably not that interested in your thoughts on mask wearing. They're interested in my thoughts on it, but probably not yours. If you do videos, it is highly suggested that you include subtitles in any video, perhaps very large. Ideally, you would like video that has no audio component at all. The best video really doesn't have any audio component, maybe some music, maybe an occasional word with the words on the bottom, but largely is not language based or linguist. There's not a lot of talking. Why? Well, first of all, people are, people oftentimes engage in social mobile media on their phones while they're going places. And if I'm in a doctor's office waiting, I really don't want to have to put in earbuds just to hear what you're trying to say. I always despise when it's like, it looks like an interesting video, looks like an interesting idea, and then you click and it's a video and there's no words. Like, that is very annoying. Or sometimes like late at night, I'll be looking at my phone and wanting to see, oh, here's a story from CNN or something. I use mine a lot for news. So I go to look at the video, and of course it's audio based, right? And now I either have to get out a pair of earbuds, or I have to wake up my wife, and my wife is not going to be happy about that as one of the options, right? So keep in mind that subtitles are kind of an ideal, anytime you do anything with video, ideally no audio. Videos are good, keep them short, 1 minute, 2 minutes tops, and keep them with images or text at the bottom. The other thing, one of the other things is when you're shooting, used to be they'd always say turn your phone sideways so that you can people got the video like they would on their TV. Now the assumption is if you're shooting video for the digital or social media or mobile devices, shoot it vertically. Now there's a little bit of a change from even like 5 years ago what they would have thought, because most people would have, even if they were looking at Facebook, they would have been doing it on their computer a lot of times. Now I don't know too many people who probably look at Facebook on their computer on a regular basis. They're more likely to look at it on their phone. People on Instagram are not doing it from their computer for the most part. People aren't on Twitter from their computer. They're not on Snapchat from their computer. They're on it from their mobile device. And as a result, if you pull up a video and it's shot this way, it actually only shows up in part of the screen. If you're watching this on your phone, you have to turn it to get the full image. Whereas if you're watching on your computer, the way I'm shooting this is. But if you're and I'm shooting this for people on computers, so that's why it's horizontal. But if you're doing it for people on phones, and that's the kind of thing, short devices, keep it vertical. It comes across a little bit more savvy about the way people are going to do it. For those who are on a computer, it will take up a smaller part of their screen, but that's not really the community. The idea here is keep in mind who you're trying to communicate with. If you're trying to communicate with people on a mobile device, then keep it that way. Keep in mind that social media is ephemeral. It doesn't last long. And so that's something to keep in mind. The other ideas here to keep in mind is to consider user generated. Don't think that everything you post into social media has to be yours. It can become from other experts, other people, and you can connect it to your own product. You can also have celebrity endorsements or, people who are social media leaders. I'm trying to think of the word for that, but social media influencers. My wife is saying this in the background. So, and because I'm like, it escaped my mind there for a second. That's what happens when you get this old. Anyway, social media influencers, and that's perfectly fine. It may even be worthwhile for you guys to consider having social media influencers within a public relations firm, or to hire people who are already social media influencers. That would all be considered a good use. And the other thing to keep in mind, anything you do in social media, is you should keep, while you're doing your social listing and everything, you should moderate, you should interact with your public. People go to social media because it's social. They want to be part of the conversation. And so you need to keep that in mind and interact with your public. Now, some of the people who are most successful, who've kind of used social media to their best advantage, are people who have made an effort to actually interact. One of the examples is there was a guy who used to be on the CBS Evening News when I was in high school named Dan Rather. And Dan Rather got kind of fired from CBS over a whole, using some documents from the military that weren't really real when he was working for 60 Minutes. And he kind of got ousted, right? And there was some concern that these were an elaborate ruse and he wasn't behind it, but he got kicked out, in the middle of this. Anyway, so he left CBS and he ended up starting just kind of a social media news site where he comments on things. But the thing is Dan Rather has a fairly successful social media, he would be a social media influencer in the news area. And the reason why he's a social media influencer in the news area, or what has made him successful, partially is that after he posted a news thing or he made commentary on the news, people would comment and he would go back and comment on them, like their posts, respond to their posts. He now has a team of people who do this to help him out, but that the Dan Rather team, blue checkmark group, does that. But the point is Dan Rather made and was able to kind of become an influencer by his ability to interact. And so by interacting, if you just post stuff and you never respond, never interact, never comment, people realize it's a one-way conversation. This is you advertising to them. You need to make sure that you aren't just advertising to them. You're there to be their friend. That's what people are there for. And so you need to have that kind of concept. Respond, comment, like things. I mean, you can't do it on everything, but the more you do, the more they see you interacting, the more they will get a sense that you are part of that, and they're in a relationship with you, which is the point of public relations. It's about a relationship